Okay, so this is a video response to Kelly Kitagawa, and she's made a video entitled Why Reverse Racism Doesn't Exist. And I'd like to address this. Um, Usually I wouldn't go to the extent of making a video over every other video that I sort of watch or take issue with, but she's disabled comments, and I feel the things that she is saying needs to be challenged, and there needs to be a counter argument. Um, because after all, that should be one of the things that YouTube is for. But she's blocked comments there, so she's basically coming out with all these statements and, in my view, in a rather arrogant way, not allowing herself to be challenged. Um, Incidentally, the majority of my videos I do allow comments. Not all of them, but the majority. Um, so I'm going to address some of your points. I will say this, although I strongly disagree with what you're saying, I And although I found it very frustrating to have to sit through that video and listen to what you were saying, um, I I believe enough to say that I don't think you have bad intentions with it. I think you're dead wrong, but I don't think you have bad intentions with it. So I am going to resist my gut feeling, to call you a racist. Of course, you would refute that because that's the whole premise of your argument. But I'll try to, hold back from personal insults, and because you haven't targeted any individual, um, but I'm going to tackle some of the points you're making and say why I believe you're wrong. You're coming also from a point where this is the case, rather than, you know, it being opinion. You're sort of dictating what it is, and that in itself I find rather arrogant. But I'm going to break this down. Um, okay, so what you're saying is reverse racism doesn't exist. Um, Actually, believe it or not, I agree with that, insofar as I don't believe in that term. I believe racism is racism is racism, and I made another video about this a while back, but that obviously wasn't addressing your point specifically. Um, so in that sense, I don't believe that reverse racism exists. I don't use the term actually. I believe it racism is just racism. Now, the whole sort of central point of your argument is that people who say this are white, and that's probably true. People who use the term reverse racism probably are white. I don't use the term myself. I just use plain old racism as terminology goes. Um, and the contention that you have is that white people can never experience racism because they've never experienced institutional racism. Now, in this regard, that's absolutely true, insofar as white people have never experienced institutional racism. Um, I don't need a history lesson on that. White people were never enslaved in the same way, certainly not in America. They were never, told they had to go to the back of the bus. They were never, the list goes on and on and on. So it is absolutely true that historically speaking, white people did not suffer the same sort of institutional racism. And I'm saying that as a white person. Okay, I acknowledge that. I totally get that. Where I take issue with your point is that you're saying racism is solely defined by historic context. That's what you seem to be saying. Now, my understanding of racism is generalizing an entire group and demonizing an entire group as one. You said that white people never have to suffer as a group for the actions of some. Well, that is plain wrong, because that is exactly what you're doing. You're saying that all white people should be treated as one and the same, i.e., all white people don't have a right to complain about racism because white people traditionally weren't, they didn't suffer from institutional racism. But there's an inconsistency with your argument because you're saying that other groups um, suffered as a group. But what we're saying now is that all white people are demonized solely for their skin pigmentation. And you're failing to recognize that white people have no choice over their skin pigmentation. And I think you don't understand that a video like yours is going to rile a lot of people because whether you're a racist or not, the assumption will be that you view all white people as one and the same. Now, at the start of the video, you sort of made an attempt to say that, oh, well, it's unpleasant, that's not good. So you weren't, I'm not going to say that you're condoning anti-white racism, but you are excusing it and you are basically downplaying it and saying it's not racism. But in the end of the day, if a black guy or an Asian guy says to my face, you're white trash or you're a white piece of shit or whatever, will I see that as racism? Hell yes. Hell yes. It doesn't matter if my ancestors were not enslaved. That is not the point. You know, historic context is important, but it's not everything. In my opinion, and I think a lot of people would agree with this, racism in its purest definition is demonizing an entire group. Now, you fail to realize that those who talk about reverse racism, and I don't like the term, but I believe it is racism, see double standards. And if you cannot bring yourself to condemn people who demonize all white people, you're part of the problem. You're part of the problem. You know, why is it so difficult to just recognize that racism is racism is racism? You know, constantly focusing on this idea that because there wasn't that institutional basis, then it's okay. It's okay to treat white people like dirt. It's okay to treat a liberal white person exactly the same way as a KKK supremacist. That is an obnoxious, narrow, and ignorant world outlook. If you want to, basically, that's what you're arguing in your video. And I don't think you realize just how patronizing you come across. Um, Now, I don't believe that you hate white people, but I believe you're sending out a very damaging message, which is essentially if you're white, you have to take abuse because, hey, your ancestors done this and that. So if you get abused, it's no big deal. That's essentially what you're saying. And I think that is reprehensible. I think it's a very childish attitude to take insofar as saying that something is wrong for one group of people, but it's fine if others do it. That's childish because it is based on double standards. And I, I abhor racism from white supremacists. And you will find that white people are among the first to condemn that. But I think it is utterly insane that this notion that white people can be abused for no other reason than the skin pigmentation that they have no choice over, and they have no right to call it what it is, racism. I'll have you know, a young man was killed in Glasgow, which I'm guessing you're from the States. Glasgow's it's a big city in Scotland. He was killed 10 years ago solely for being white. Now, I invite you to tell that young man's family he wasn't a victim of a racist attack. He was killed by an Asian gang who were specifically looking for a white victim. You tell his family that. You know, I listened to your video. I was trying to be objective. I was trying to sort of be reasonable and see if you were making fair points. I was trying hard, but I'm afraid I just come to the conclusion that people like you just add fuel to the fire. All you're doing is creating division because you're telling white people have no right to complain simply because white people didn't have the historical context. You know, but that is ridiculous because I'm not responsible for what slavers did. I'm not personally responsible for that. You're saying white people don't have to face collective responsibility. That is utter rubbish. White people are collectively demonized all the time. And if I sound angry, it's because, frankly, I am. Because your attitude, frankly, displays the sort of problem I was talking about in that video. It's a while since I made the video, but I just couldn't disagree with you more. In the end of the day, if you treat someone badly solely because of the color of skin, you're a racist. And there's no getting away from that. I don't buy this logic that because you're a black person or you're an Asian person and you've suffered racism from white supremacists, that gives you an excuse to treat white people like dirt. No, it doesn't. By all means, hate the people who done that to you. That doesn't give you an excuse to treat all white people with contempt. Now, you claimed that you weren't coming from a victimhood perspective. I think you are, actually. I don't know if you personally suffer racism, and I'm sorry if you have, but you came into that video, obviously, you were talking about creating dialogue, but all you're doing is creating division. And I'll leave it there because I don't frankly have very many positive things to say. You've disabled comments on the video, so this is the only way that anyone can provide a counter argument. You're very welcome to comment here and say why you think I'm wrong, but if you're going to make an inflammatory video like that, you need to understand that people are going to be unhappy about it. I'm a human being. Okay, yes, I'm a white guy, but I'm also a human being first and foremost. And I resent all racism, whoever it's directed at. If I saw someone, attacking you because of your background, I would be the first to condemn that person. But I just think it is I just thoroughly disagree with you. And I think you're sending out entirely the wrong message. And I hope you see this video.